All right. Hey, how's it going?
How you doing?
Good,
Good morning
good.
slash afternoon.
Yeah, there you go. We are so excited to have you as one of the speakers for Next Level. Do you mind just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Well, it feels good to be here. I'm very appreciative of being here. My name is Daryl Wingfield. I have this brand called Purpose Serve, and pretty much it's an initiative to help people take practical means on their dreams and aspirations. And through basketball, it has opened the door for me to, understand these things and understand what I'm more deeply passionate about more than playing the game of basketball. And that's just, inspiring people to get rid of those limited beliefs and get to their higher selves in a sense.
I love it. And I'm a little biased, but I personally love your podcast. I've actually had the opportunity to be a guest on it. And then you also hyped up Next Level on it as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's so cool. Your mindset is amazing. Really quick, I'm going to tell them the story of how we got connected. So Daryl randomly messaged me, like you found my account through my podcast page, which I haven't started yet, but you messaged me and then we just hit it off right away. Um, and I thought our podcast was fire too, but that's one of my favorite things about being on the
It
online.
was.
Yeah, it was so cool. It's just I feel like I've known this guy forever and we just have such a similar mindset. And so you'll definitely be seeing more collabs between us in the future, all these Next Level attendees. But yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. We'll talk more about that in the Instagram live. But do you mind answering the question before you get started? What does going to the next level mean to you? And what advice would you give to anyone who wants to go to the next level in their own life?
All right. So what next level means to me, like going to the next level, it just means transcending what is going on for me right now, which is means getting past those things that I'm scared of, that I'm fearful of, and those limited beliefs, and going for something that truly means something to me. And to me, that means going to the next level. That's you got to leave that stagnation to go for something, which oftentimes may seem uncomfortable at first, but in the long run, it's always beneficial in the long run. So my advice to anybody that's trying to go to the next level, just get rid of, which majority of the speakers, which I'm learning from as well, is just learning that, we have these things that we are scared of, but don't let it stop you. Don't let it be the means to an end, because you're going to stay in that place forever and you're not even going to take a chance on yourself. So going to the next level is just going past those things that we're scared of, which often requires us taking action towards a thing instead of thinking about it the whole entire time, and that's going to the next level. As soon as you take whatever action it is to go to the next level.
Love it. That was so good. Awesome. Well, like I said, definitely check out Daryl's podcast, Purpose Served. He's going to be talking to you guys a lot about podcasts today, and I know he has a lot of really great information to share. So, with that, I'll turn it over to you. You're going to do awesome.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, so hello everybody. In 6 steps, I'm going to teach you how to make a podcast from wherever you're at. Even if you don't have a podcast right now and you're thinking about, I want to start a podcast. It's a great idea. I got all of these ideas. The one thing that's missing is just you putting the necessary actions towards setting it up. So, like I said, in 6 simple steps, you can have a podcast if you apply them correctly. And every single step to these 6 is essential to the one that's coming before it and the one that's coming after it. Now, the very, very, very first step is setting the destination. So, in order for you to have a podcast, you must know at first, it seems obvious now, but just having a podcast. I want to have a podcast. That's how it started with me. Now, I got the idea from a friend of mine named Steve Hayes, who made my logo for my brand. So huge shout out to him. Like a lot of these things, I wouldn't have made it as far as I did without him. But setting that destination, number one, is the right now the most essential thing. So it's making a podcast. So what would your podcast be about? Why are you making a podcast? And what are the things that you're passionate about and that you're interested in? And these are all of the things that instead of keeping in your head, just write them down. Just write down all of these things, these ideas that you have for this podcast. And that's you, in a way, taking action towards getting this thing in motion. And also, at the end of the day, you have to know that you are the vehicle that's going to get yourself to that destination. No other vehicle can get you there. You are the vehicle. So setting a destination is the most important thing. So pretty much with my podcast, the things that interest me were successful people, people who are passionate about what they're doing, and people that's adding value to other people's lives through what they were doing. So that was pretty much my why, my what, and everything. And from there, you must also have something that you can talk all day about without, getting tired of talking about it like ever. And that's how passionate that you have to be about it. And from then, once you have all of these things set, you could then move on to step number two, which is just as essential as step number one, but now slowly but surely you're just getting the gears going. So step number two is determine the tools and the resources that you need in order to get to your destination. So right now, since the destination is the podcast, then determine the resources and tools that you need in order to start a podcast. Like for me, I realized the very first thing that I needed was audio equipment. That was the very first thing that I needed. So I just went online and I tried to find audio equipment. And also, I was tight on money around the time, so I didn't want to get anything too crazy. So the equipment that I got was Rockville two-person podcast audio equipment, which cost just around, I would want to say, $175. So with that, you got podcast equipment, not only for yourself, but just in case you want to have a guest on your podcast as well. So boom, you're checking off one of those tools or resources that you need in order to get to the destination. Now that you have your podcast equipment, you're then going to need like software in order to upload your podcast and even record the audio for the podcast. Now the audio, like the recording software that you can use is GarageBand. It's free. You can download it. Like a lot of these things is the way that I tried to take the least cost-effective thing as possible to put it together, because I really didn't want to start to do the podcast, but also I didn't want to look at it from a money perspective as if that was going to be a hindrance for me not getting to that destination. Getting to the destination was like the most important thing to me. So with that being said, like I got the podcast equipment, I got GarageBand, and then from now I had to find a RSS feed hosting website. So there's two different platforms that you can use for this. The first one being Buzzsprout is the one that I currently use, and that's easy. You go on there. All you have to do is take whatever file that you recorded with your audio equipment, and then after that, you'll take that file and upload it on Buzzsprout, and that's how you get your podcast like out there to like Apple Podcasts, to Spotify, to pretty much any of the platforms that you can probably think of, iHeartRadio. There's so many different ones out there that you can upload your podcast to. And if you want to take it to another level beyond that, and not only do you want to have an audio podcast, but you also want a visual podcast as well, where people can look at a video, you can use like iMovie this is what I do. I take iMovie with the audio clip and the videos that I use. In the video, the camera that I use is a Nikon camera. I don't know exactly what the camera is, but as long as you have a camera, you can use that to upload. Now, when I first started doing this, I couldn't find anywhere where someone was telling me how to upload the podcast audio and have the video at the same time. And this step right here stumped me the longest. So I'm sitting there like, I can't do both. There's no way. I see, podcasts all the time. Like, for example, the Joe Rogan Experience. That one I'm just saying like, oh, he has an audio and he has a video that's together. And that's ideally what I wanted to be. Now, I wasn't going to shortchange myself because I didn't know, what I was doing. It was just came to a point of just figuring it out. And what I did was, like I said, I took iMovie and I took those files that I recorded with my camera and I uploaded the audio from GarageBand and those videos that I recorded and I synced them together. And then from there, even on iMovie, you could take that and upload it straight to YouTube. And from then, I'm just like, all right, GarageBand, audio equipment, Rockville, camera, iMovie, just putting all these things together. And then after that, last but not least, I figured that I needed somewhere to really put this out there through, like, for example, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. And that way, if you break anything to a simple science, even with like this, all you have to do is just put yourself in the right places and get the right materials that you need, and don't really think past that at this point, because step number two is just determining the tools and resources that you need in order to make a podcast. Now we're going to move on to step number three. Now I would want to say this is the accountability step. Now step number three is determining how long that it's going to take you to make this podcast. Now for me, when I made my podcast, I got all of my equipment. Well, no, I got the idea to make the podcast in the beginning of September. Once I got the idea to make the podcast in the beginning of September, I told myself 1 month. I gave myself 1 month to reach that destination. So that was, I made it for October 15th, I believe, that I wanted to have, my first podcast uploaded, not recorded. I wanted it uploaded and done. And from then on out, I moved on to the next step. Now, beforehand, you have to, I call these mini destinations to get to the main destination. Now, this is a part of step number four, and this is a part of seeing things to completion. And that's essential to this whole entire process. Just because you got the tools and the resources that you need, you have to use them. If you don't use them, then those tools and resources are useless. So number four, since I know the time that I needed it to get done through number three, and then backtracking to number two, I have the tools and the resources. Now I'm just coming up with a plan to get all of this done. Now, the many destinations I would want to say is getting the podcast equipment, getting all the necessary things that you need physically to you, and then start piecing everything together and holding yourself accountable to whatever date that you set for yourself, and making sure that you're doing everything every single day in regards to piecing this all together, and me even breaking this down. I know at this point, you guys like, all right, it's not that complicated like I thought it would be, but this is something that while I was going through, I was making it more complicated than what it was due to the fact that it was my first time doing it. But everything always starts with a form of thought and then is followed by action. And these is one of those things. So once I was able to do that, set that date of October 15th, then after that, we move on to step number five, which is be consistent. Now, since I had October 15th to have my first podcast up, which it didn't work out like that. Once I ordered my podcast equipment, it took longer for it to show up than I thought it would. So I didn't upload my podcast equipment to probably like 2 weeks later after that point that I set for myself. But I held myself so accountable that, before that time, like even came with the podcast equipment showing up, I was putting so much pressure on myself with wanting to get it done like so bad. And once it did, I told myself, all right, I got everything I need. I set everything up. Now it's just time to record the podcast. And then I recorded the podcast. And then after that, I did everything that I said. I uploaded it up to Buzzsprout, and you can use Anchor as well. And the difference between Buzzsprout and Anchor, it's easier to get sponsorships than Buzzsprout. Now, when you sign up for Anchor uses themselves as your first sponsorship to your podcast and to the platform, so that way it's a win-win for everybody. And you're even going into it knowing how the sponsorships and everything works. So, but Anchor is good. But Buzzsprout was the thing that I started with, and that's the thing that I'm currently sticking with as well. But both works just as well. Now, back to number 5, being consistent. This step is so, so, so important because with this step, you're creating a behavior pattern. Now, making a podcast, it's cool, but think about it. You're not just trying to make one podcast if you're doing it. Most likely, you want to keep making podcasts. So if you got all the tools and the resources that you need, then you have everything you need to continue to reach that destination. At number 5, you should be at that destination, but also adding a behavior to just keep going. So for me, being consistent was uploading a podcast every week. Every week. At first, it started off as Wednesday, but the more crazier that my schedule got, I just was like, one of these days, it just has to get uploaded no matter what. No matter what. And when we move on to step number 6 is go back to step number 2 if you haven't reached your destination. So to me personally, this step is the most important out of all 6. So even if you did reach number 5, which I did with just completing the whole podcast in general, um, you can still apply step number 6. Step number 6 to me ensures that you won't let failure get to you and you won't let failure stop you. And you're going to stay persistent to the task at hand, which is getting to the destination. So, for example, say that you do get the podcast equipment and something doesn't work for the podcast equipment. Don't use that as an excuse to say, no, I don't want to do a podcast no more just because you reached a bump in the road or a little adversity. Your whole point is to get to the destination. And getting to the destination means that you have to be persistent. And being persistent means that you don't know what failure means, even when it happens to you. That means that no matter what, you have no resolve. This is what it is. And for me, that's how I treated the podcast. The podcast for me was pretty much feeling so deeply inspired to do it that I didn't really care that how long the podcast equipment was going to take to get to me or anything. And I didn't even care that I didn't even know what I was really doing while I was doing it. I would go on Google, I would go on YouTube, but they wasn't really saying exactly how to put things together ideally how I seen fit. But all I knew was it took action for me to just start piecing all of these things together. So with that being said, through these 1 through 5 steps, you should at the end of it be have a podcast. So just to recap the steps, number 1 is setting the destination. Number 2 is determine the tools and the resources that you need. Number 3 is determine the time that it's going to take for you to reach your destination and hold yourself accountable to it. Number 4 is be consistent. And number 5 is, well, I just see it through to completion was number 4. Number 5 was see through it to completion. And number 6 is just in case you do fail and you don't reach your destination, go back to number 2. And ultimately with step number 6 is never the destination that's wrong. Is oftentimes our approach to the destination, and oftentimes we will look at it like it's not us. It's the thing that I'm going for. But from my journey and what I've learned is that oftentimes it is us when we say that it's not. And it's our unwillingness to change the reason why we never reach that destination that we set out for ourselves. And as simple as it is for applying this to a podcast, you can apply this to anything that you're trying to do and where you're currently at in life. It's just sometimes, to me, I break things down into 2 things, preparation and then taking action, coming up with a plan and then acting out on that plan. And oftentimes we have a hard time with the information that we get to apply it right away. And with this, if you know these things right now, if you're hearing them, then this would be a great thing to start doing. And especially if you want to simply just start a podcast. If I didn't start this podcast, I wouldn't be known Reagan for what she's doing, and I wouldn't be here doing this presentation right now, which is to me personally is a huge deal because this is like, you know, at the top of the list for me is inspiring people to take action towards something. And I would want to say around last year, around this time, this wasn't the case. I didn't have my brand. I didn't have a podcast. I didn't have anything. But deep down inside of me, this is something that I wanted to do, but simply didn't know how to go about it until I started figuring out the different things that I can do to go about it. And another person that I want to have give a huge thanks to is Sean Mills for him even helping me out with starting a brand and start getting these ideas out there. But with those six steps, like I said, you can simply apply that to anything that you're trying to do. But just don't be scared to fail and just get past those limited beliefs that you have because they're there for a reason. And to me, they're there to show you that you have to broaden your perspective to the world around you and broaden the reality that you're looking at things. And that's the whole point of this journey. And that's what I'm learning from all the other speakers as well. And it just takes a strong will and a strong mindset to no matter what, just apply yourself in a way that you're taking purposeful action towards something and not just taking any action towards something because those two are two different things. You know, if you wanted to take a start a podcast and you love drawing is not going to get you to that podcast. You know, that's just taking action, but it's not taking purposeful action. Getting the stuff that you're required to get in order to start a podcast, that's taking purposeful action. And as long as you have a destination, just create a plan to take purposeful action and you're going to get there no matter what. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. And I thank you guys for listening to me and apples.